Techlandia is recorded at the Central Office on the East Side in Portland. Central Office is a one stop for all your office or meeting needs. Check them out at centraloffice.com. Welcome to Techlandia, a podcast about and for the technology industry, a place to learn, connect, and engage with leaders and thinkers involved in the technology industry. You can check us out at techoregon.org, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the latest episode of Techlandia, Tao's regular podcast series. I'm Skip Newberry, President and CEO of Tao. And with us today, we have Lisa Gralnick, who's the Managing Director, US North America, and the Global Head of Sustainability and Impact for IF Design. Lisa, welcome.
Thanks so much. I'm thrilled to be here, Skip.
Awesome. Well, as our listeners know, I typically will start out by asking our featured guests to share a little bit about their background and professional journey and how they ended up at their current organization. So I'd love for you to maybe take a couple minutes and kind of walk us through.
Well, I love this question and then I loathe this question because I want it to be really short and sweet. But as we get older, and when you have my kind of career, it's never short and sweet. The bottom line is I joined IF Design just a little over 2 years ago. It was not where I saw my career heading. Prior to that, I'd spent 7 years running my own strategy consultancy focused on brand positioning, go to market, and impact advising. So really, really big clients like Walmart and really tiny clients, including many startups and things. Um, Largely, but not exclusively, in either kind of the social impact, sustainability, and or design space, which is kind of the trajectory of my career. I started that company coming out of, and I'm working kind of backwards. I was the vice president of brand and innovation at Chobani, the big dairy company,
Mhm.
which was super awesome. It was a really, really fun role. And prior to that, I'd been the first head of marketing in the US for Moo.com, which is the England-based but global printing company, which I was responsible for driving growth in the design categories. So really, entertainment and fashion and graphic design and all these kinds of things that really are fun and robust and help me today. And before that, I had been at Adidas. Doing some change management, which is typical of me, where you kind of come in, you set a brand strategy for growth and repositioning, and then execute that strategy. That's kind of where I've always been. And I was at the Boston
Mhm.
Consulting Group prior to that. And before business school, I'd spent 9 years in the fashion industry. So between Paris and New York, and working with really high end creative talent in the world prior to digital, meaning prior to social media, when it was a very walled garden and our references all came out of, kind of great art and a totally different universe. And I learned how to build wonderful brands and big global entities and aspiration and inspiration and all the things that I think are still really relevant today. So it's been there's a red thread, which is design and impact and brand throughout all of this. So that's my career journey. And I joined IF at the suggestion of one of our jury chairpersons, who now teaches at the GSD at Harvard, who I had worked with on some freelance work with the North Face, another
Mhm.
fashion brand, years before. She had been at Nike, and she said, "I think you're the right person." And I said, "Well, you recommend, I take the call." And here we are, 2+ years later, and I'm thrilled that that's what happened.
That's exciting. And it sounds like you've gotten some experience both with kind of high growth emerging brands like Chobani, as well as some very large established ones along the way too. And that's definitely a lot of variety. I'm wondering, in addition to that sort of red thread of design, can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of sustainability? Because that also is an area where, as you said, you really kind of defined your career. And what are some of the trends right now that you're seeing?
Well, I'm really happy, I have to say, that finally it's a topic. I mean, when I left the fashion industry in the beginning of June, just about a week before Steve Jobs introduced the first iPhone, um, you know, sustainability wasn't there. It wasn't a topic, it wasn't relevant. But I'd grown up in Los Angeles, where we always had kind of water crises and heat crises and pollution crises mixed with, summers on the East Coast, in a place where you had to bring in your own water and you had to burn your own trash and you had to, kind of schlep your own stuff. And so I had this juxtaposition of kind of why our environment was so important. And I wrote my college thesis on identity politics. So I've always been a bit of a bleeding heart in terms of the social impact side of things and justice. And so I left fashion largely because the sexiness of the design and the aspiration was really, like, it had played out for me. What I was really longing for was impact, and I was watching what we were creating, and it didn't feel like it was positive impact, neither on the social, but especially not on the environmental side. And so I went back and got a graduate degree, and unfortunately the intention was to come back into the luxury sector and focus on sustainability, mostly environmental sustainability, but also social equity on the kind of supply side. And I graduated to the financial collapse of '08, and there was no conversation in the luxury sector that was happening. But even then, people would say, when you go into even a consulting firm that was focused on sustainability, they'd be like, "You don't have any experience." And you'd say, "We don't even have a global definition of what sustainability means. Does it matter that I have no experience in this when this is my passion? This is what I know. I have a lot of experience that's relevant." And what I'm really happy about, to get to your question, is today we still don't have a global definition of sustainability. It's unfortunate, but we do have a lot of progress and we have a lot of awareness. And
Mhm.
we do have some global norms, whether we're talking about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or we're talking about, carbon measurement, or we're talking about net zero targets. We are starting to have conversations, ongoing conversations at a civic level, so within the populace and, government, local and national governments, but also within the corporate entity. And I think designers have an enormous role to play. And it's one of the things I love being at IF Design, is being able to then lead that impact. And sustainability overall, what it means, what it is continuously evolving, but it's evolved a long way. So I can get into some detailed trends. I can talk about the stuff we're doing at IF, but I think, in 2025, we're behind where we should be, but we've made progress. So I guess that's what I'm seeing.
That's great. That's great. And I think next, what I'd like to do is maybe kind of drive out here a little bit to maybe 20,000 feet and take a step back and ask you if you could provide a little bit of background on IF, which is kind of a storied institution in the design world, and explain a little bit about its role and function. And then maybe we could get into some more specifics again around some of the trends that you're seeing and leading really at IF.
Happily. So you asked me a little bit about IF Design as an organization, and IF has a remarkable 72-year history. So we were founded in 1953, and the founding of IF, which is International Form Design, was in Hanover, Germany. And Hanover, because Hanover was determined by the Brits actually at the end of the war and kind of in the rebuilding of Europe, it was named the location of the Hanover Messe, the big trade show in industrial design, because Northern Europe, and specifically Germany in particular, was always and remains a large industrial manufacturing hub. And so, bringing back kind of how do you rebuild the continent post-war, they said, okay, let's make this huge trade show. And IF was the award body, in fact, for that industrial trade fair. And so, during this time, you're talking about kind of like the expansion of Bauhaus. You're talking about like Braun at the, under the tutelage of Dieter Hams, who's, certainly one of the world's most iconic industrial designers, who also took an IF Design, the first ever Lifetime Achievement Award at our awards ceremony in 2024. But, people like this were involved as jurors and as well as participants in the IF Design story for the first 30 plus years. Over time, we expanded beyond Hanover, Germany, although that's still global headquarters, and we expanded beyond industrial design, although product design is still our largest discipline area with 26 categories underneath it within the IF Design Award. We have subsequently, we were always founded kind of as a nonprofit. We got restructured in 2018. So the IF Design Foundation is the umbrella entity for everything that is IF Design. And under that, we have, of course, the IF Design Award, which is what this original story is, and which now has grown into 9 design disciplines. So product, of course, plus packaging and communications and service and systems design and architecture and interior architecture and UX and UI and concepts. And then we have now this year in 2026, 93 categories below that. So really, really, really going deeper and deeper into the breadth of what is design, and largely commercial design. So we have 11,000 entries across these 93 categories from about 70 participants in about 70 countries every year. In addition to the IF Design Award, we also host an IF Design Student Award and an IF Design Social Impact Prize. One is for students, one is for social entrepreneurs and existing nonprofits. We give away 150,000 euros of prize money to those each year. And the idea is that design has to solve for one or more of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So a very different beast. And then we have all the content. We have, we spent a lot of money and time putting together the website and the app. So it's 1954 is the first year of the award, and we have index winners since then. So it's an amazing resource for research and development for all designers everywhere. Plus, we have an online magazine. We have a podcast that I host called Future of XYZ. And we've now, for the 4th year in a row, have published a trend report, which is a very robust 300-page, kind of deep dive into what's happening in the design world, not in terms of yellow is the color of 2025, but what are the the mega trends that we're seeing that are really going to be impacting the future. So we do a lot. And more excitingly, we're launching this fall another aspect of the business, really in support of the foundation's mission, which is to support design research and education. We are launching an IF Design Academy for executive education. And I can talk about that more as well.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. Would love to hear more about the academy. And it sounds like over time it went from the focus on the awards to also kind of providing a lot of informational resources and benchmarking and other thought leadership to designers globally. And I'm wondering, how does that play into, is the academy kind of the next evolution of that, just formal training for executives?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, there are a couple of things. The foundation has always been academically led, and we do a lot of research and really about how design can be a social benefit for the world. And so there's a lot of global research. There are, kind of these gatherings, if you will. We make publications, etc. And but it's very academic, and and largely been European, despite the research being global. A lot of the activations happen within that European academic community. And the award, of course, all of the awards are global. I mean, between the Social Impact Prize and the Student Award, we get another 12,000 plus entries a year, from about 130 countries. So it is extraordinarily global, and we have a lot of data as a result that comes in. And so the trend report emerged actually out of how much information we get across, IF design threshold every year, and how that can then, in service to the mission of a design research and education, be meted out and shared with our community. So that's how the trend report came to be. And I think, to your question, the academy is really the next level of formalizing this. The tracks that we'll have is, of course, leadership for mid-managers and for executives, standing up a design team, which is its own process, future-proofing, so that's around emerging tech as well as sustainability. But one of the things that I, as a business school grad who's almost always worked within the design space, that I am really passionate about is the track that's really business fundamentals. So teaching designers how to talk the language of business, because one of the things that I think we in the design world can all see right now, which I find rather devastating, is design has always been sexy. People love design and creativity, and they love what comes of it. And in fact, companies who have a strong brand and strong design, outperform by many factors companies who don't have those two things, except that you very rarely, even within design led organizations, have designers sitting in the boardroom, in the investor suite, in that decision making body. And I think increasingly we really need to start talking the language of business and not only of beauty and aesthetics and materiality and texture and all the, and the UX. We have to be able to say, okay, what's the ROI? What's the margin? What's the impact of scale? What's this, supply chain? And some designers can do this really well, but it's not something that you learn in design school. And so we want to be able to provide, among other benefits, that learning because that sustains the design industry going forward.
I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of what you're seeing in terms of trends globally within the design world. Like what is it that IF is really kind of focused on right now that they are excited about?
I mean, look, I can get into some of the trends because there's a lot. What I want to start with, though, is the sustainability question that you asked about before.
Mhm.
So when you introduced me, in addition to running the U.S. North American market for IF, which, by the way, we've been active in this market for a long time, but we have very low brand awareness. So if you go to Asia, where we've had offices for 20 plus years, or even certain countries outside of Germany and Europe and in Latin America, IF is like the premier mark of excellence in design. In the US, within certain sectors of industrial design, it's recognized, but not in the communications design sector, in the agency and branding world, not in the architecture and interiors world, not necessarily in the digital design world. So that's the mission there. And we're seeing obviously an enormous amount of digital work come across the threshold, not just from the US, but globally, because of course that's the way that the world is shifting. So that is something we're increasingly focused on, and architecture and interior architecture being something also that we're looking to expand because there are very few global platforms for it. But the sustainability piece is, to me, as the global head of sustainability and impact, one of the things that was paramount to my taking this role was being able to say, where is social and environmental sustainability being considered within the jurying process of this major design award? And it was and had been for some time not buried, but a factor within the impact criteria. So you have idea, classic design crit stuff. Idea, form, and function are three of the criteria within the IF Design Award. Differentiation, and then it was impact. And that included commercial impact plus social and environmental. And people would either address it or they wouldn't. You didn't have a lot for the jurors to work with. What we did starting in 2024, and it had kind of made some small shifts prior to that, but in 2024, we relabeled impact sustainability. Commercial impact went into differentiation, and that entire 20% of the score, the criteria sustainability, asked specific questions about the social environmental considerations that were put into designing, executing, and bringing to market this product or this digital experience or this building or whatever the category is. And we then ask a series that we've developed with outside experts, a working group that we have, some very serious questions about that have the greatest impact on that particular category. So it might be, what your server looks like and how the energy is being, generated for your servers for a digital product, or what your load times are, or it might be what kind of circular considerations for materiality did you use in a particular product, or how are you educating or making accessible. There are these kinds of questions, plus then all the criteria and accreditations that exist across all these different disciplines and categories globally. So sustainability and what it means and how we can embed it into what is design excellence at its very core through the juring process is is one of the things we are extraordinarily focused on at IF, and that seems to be really resonating both with our participants as well as with our 130 plus expert jurors.
Nice. And I'm wondering too, in terms of some of the stuff that we're seeing right now, AI in technology is an area where there's a increasing awareness around the amount of energy consumed by that technology, right? And some of the challenges in kind of modernizing all of the infrastructure. And that represents opportunities to entrepreneurs, but it also, poses some serious challenges to how we kind of reimagine how things are designed and put together, to
100%.
allow for energy to flow, right? And you look at the more recent announcement between OpenAI and Johnny Ive's firm, right?
Mhm.
Which is just people are starting to say like, wow, this is really interesting. AI meets hardware. There have
Yep.
been a couple of examples of companies that have kind of failed recently that have been trying to marry those two. Is this a space that you're increasingly focused on when it comes to kind of taking the industrial design and the physical that IF has been known for and kind of marrying it into the digital?
I love the question. It's probably, I mean, it's obviously for Techlandia listeners really important to answer. And I'm not going to punt, but I'm going to say it's one aspect. When you have so many disciplines and categories,
Mhm.
it is one aspect. I think, I actually in partnership with someone who spoke at our Trend conference last year, who is strategy partner at a digital design agency in London. We spoke at South by Southwest this year in Austin, and it was exactly this. It was designing digital for a circular future. And we were talking about the fact that like Microsoft is investing $80 billion this year and reopening 3 Mile Island just which is of course like the site of the largest nuclear meltdown in North American history, and it's because there just is such enormous energy needs to power AI that all of these companies have. And you're seeing Meta make similar investments. And obviously, you just mentioned this kind of crossover. So we are keenly aware of the fact that AI is here. It happened fast, I think, for all of us, the rapid adoption and evolution. And a chat GBT query takes 10 times more energy than this equivalent in the Google
Mhm.
query. So this is, I don't think the consumer or the user has been educated on these topics well enough, much less the fact that our designers just designing for what consumers want or users want without kind of building this in. So these are questions that really, IF doesn't have all the answers either. We see what comes in, and then hopefully the criteria we've set up for the jurors to ask the questions is going to provide enough information to say, was this considered?
Mhm.
And, how did you ask, like, are there ways to indicate to your user that this is the case, right? How do you lead and educate? How do you make better decisions? Because we can't turn back the clock. Now, in terms of the crossover between AI/cloud software and hardware, this is increasingly creating challenges and opportunities for the IF design kind of categories. So we have a reinvigorated category breakdown this year, some of which is about this, like service design now has systems design because a lot of like the AI flows are systems, right? It's not
Mhm.
only service based, so it's systems. And so you have some of this. And then you have also in the product, you have to have like integrated systems. So you might have like, for instance, like smart home things that isn't just the one either building material apply like building site appliance. It might not just be the alarm system or the refrigerator that has smart technology, but it's a whole integrated system. And so these are things that we're starting to catch up with and ask again the design questions around idea, form, function, and differentiation, but also the sustainability questions around social environmental impact to kind of evaluate like, is this something just new for the sake of being new, or is this actually also meaningfully excellent design?
Mhm. And I'm wondering if we could share or delve into a little bit more detail around, let's say you're an up and coming designer in the US market and you're really intrigued about this global platform that could recognize your work and your approach. how might a designer potentially get nominated or apply? What does the process look like for getting recognized in IF and the annual awards?
Well, I really appreciate the question, Skip. So the process is actually quite simple. So we have at the end of every season, we have a big, wonderful award night in Berlin. This year, it was at the end of April, followed by the Trend Conference the next day. We had about 2,400 people from around the world who were there, and we recognized our 75 gold winners, which is the highest honor of an IF Design Award. And at the Trend Conference the next day, we basically, so end of April, open the call to submissions for the following year. So 2026 is now open. It's been open since roughly May 1st, and the application deadline is November 5th. Now, we have 3 phases. You go just to ifdesign.com in order to learn more, and then you set up a profile on My IF, and it's a very straightforward process. We've invested about 4 million euros in the back end, updating both our juror tools, which are very, very cool and robust, which of course most of your listeners won't get to see, but really robust. You can see the feedback out of that at each round, but the application itself as well. So you go to My IF. If you actually apply before June 27th this year, you lock in early bird pricing. So there's an entry fee. You can enter 3 pieces of registration information, and you can still then have until November 5th to finalize the application. And the application requires you to choose your design discipline and category to write a little piece about these 5 criteria, right? The idea, form, function, differentiation, and sustainability. Sustainability has a bunch of optional questions and accreditations that one can answer. And then there's visual and link material. So PDFs, photos, videos, websites, these kinds of things get uploaded alongside if there's a communications embargo because it's not going to come out until after the award or these kinds of things. And then it's a 2-step jury process after you've applied. So the application process closes November 5th. We end up with however many applications, again, almost 11,000 the last many years. We go through manually as a team and make sure that everything opens, all the PDFs, that everything's great. And then it goes to a preliminary jury, which is an online jury process. And each juror is based on the category or categories of their expertise. And they go through and they give a score in each of these 5 criteria, which then is benchmarked not only against the category, but against all applicants. And so the top 50% of all applicants across categories, it's not balanced by geography or by category or discipline, go forward to the final jury. And at each stage, the participant will get that jury feedback chart, which is, of course, also a huge benefit. The final jury is a 2.5-day in-person event for the jurors where we pull them together in an international city, typically in Germany, and they discuss and evaluate and they poke and prod if it's a physical product or the digital execution, and they discuss, and that's where the winners are selected. So it is a super rigorous process, but the actual application process is pretty straightforward if you visit ifdesign.com and set up an account at My IF.
That's wonderful. And, just speaking for Oregon, we have a lot of really globally recognized architecture, digital design firms, agencies, right? All the areas that you want to try and encourage more participation. So to
I
our
love
audience,
that.
you heard it here first. You should
Absolutely.
apply.
You should definitely apply, and we have had some winners. We didn't have any gold winners this year, but we had a number of winners actually in the 2025 award from Portland and Portland and the area around it. So we want more.
Nice. Fantastic. Well, hopefully we can deliver on behalf of our region.
Absolutely, and I can also say that we actually have a new head of West Coast, based in Portland. So if you want to meet with IF, you don't need to wait for me to come from New York anymore. So just reach out to IFUSA at ifdesign.com, and we can get that set up.
And your new head of West Coast for IF is awesome. I'm biased, so I've known her a while, and so yes, we're happy to help make connections there for folks who are interested. And I also, as we start to wrap up here, it was interesting. You mentioned earlier that you're also a podcast host, The Future of XYZ, and so I'm wondering how does it feel to be on this side of the mic?
I thought it would be a lot easier because there's a lot less prep work involved, but actually it's really nerve-wracking. I don't know where I didn't know where it's going. I gather I like to set the questions, but no, it's super fun and it's always I mean podcasting is a great new format and medium that democratizes all of our stories in such a wonderful way. So I'm grateful that you guys are having me.
Awesome. Well, we were really grateful that you were able to take some time out of your busy schedule and join us today and share some more background on IF and also ways that, a lot of the companies and designers here in the Northwest can get involved and get recognized for the wonderful work that they do. Any sort of closing thoughts as we wrap up?
I mean, I would just say, first of all, I'm thrilled to be on the show, thrilled to be talking to Portland tech community, design community, and beyond Portland. To visit ifdesign.com as a resource for all of the stories that we tell and the magazine that we write and the Future of XYZ, which just won a Telly Award actually, but also to participate. And if you're a social entrepreneur or nonprofit, like check out the Social Impact Prize. Like it's an opportunity to win up to 50,000 euros and be surrounded. If you're a student, look at the Student Award. It costs nothing to enter either of these. And the award ceremony is happening in a couple of weeks in Bilbao at the Guggenheim. So I mean, it's a cool one. And then of course, the IF Design Award is really, really even though not well recognized in the US, it's an international forum which, and platform and community where, we don't have many of those in the world today. And that's what I love about my role. And it's what I love about being able to share IF design with all the people I meet and including you guys. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Excellent. Thanks, Lisa.